a lot of my last few years in BC was in the Prince George area and Vanderhoof area, where a lot of my job was trying to get us ahead of the beetle. Well, there was really no hope we were going to get ahead of the beetle. So I came over to Alberta, and the beetles arrived soon afterwards. I've been accused of bringing them with me, but that isn't the case. So this morning, Erica did a very nice job of the mountain pine beetle strategies that the province has initiated. So that is one part of my presentation we'll go through very quickly. I want to explain the role of FRIAA in our project, a very important role, of course. And I'm going to talk a little about the status of the mountain pine beetle infestation in northwest Alberta. And it's somewhat the orphan child to some degree, and I'll get to that as I present. And then a brief project overview. Tim is going to follow me and just give a little more detail about what this project is about. I'm going to talk a little bit about the administrative aspects. This is the first such project approved in Alberta, and there's been, I guess I can say kindly, a number of hurdles to jump through or over to get, in some cases, crashing through hurdles. But we've been able to get through them. So, as I mentioned, Erica did a really nice job this morning of presenting Alberta's objectives for mountain pine beetle. If you go to the website, they talk about a short-term strategy and a long-term strategy. And this is the short-term strategy. Erica's talked a lot about the level 1 single tree or group removal treatments. Another very important treatment that is applied under the short-term strategy is the level 2, which is led primarily by industry. And that's basically a harvesting strategy. Or as Rory mentioned this morning, a restructuring strategy. And then, of course, the strategy includes a detection and population assessment component. Now, the second part of Alberta's strategy is a longer-term, what's called the Healthy Pine Strategy. And that involved identifying the stands that were most susceptible to mountain pine beetle infestation. And this was done back in around 2007, just following the first major in-flight. And following that, the FMA holders in Alberta were directed to amend their forest management plans with a target of removing 75% of the most susceptible pine. And that's most susceptible under primarily Dr. Safranik's modeling and criteria around risk of spread. Basically, it's the larger, older pine. It was to be removed. So there are 16 FMA amendments have been done, or pardon me, forest management plan amendments have been done and approved to date, including one for the Canfor operation in Grand Prairie. And since 2011, we heard this morning from Erica and others that the government of Alberta has now provided funding for rehabilitation of stands that have been damaged and destroyed by mountain pine beetle. So the role of FRIAA, basically FRIAA is the vehicle that provides the money for projects like this. This is the eligible projects that are eligible under the grant program that's supplied. It's an agreement between SRD and FRIAA. So level 1 control, we heard this morning about Weyerhaeuser has a project in the Grand Prairie area that was funded under this program. Aerial and ground surveys, containment baiting. Primarily, these are projects led by industry with funds provided through FRIAA. So you can see the rest of them there. Last one, stand rehabilitation, which of course the focus on stands that can't be harvested and that won't be rejuvenated under natural conditions, likely without intervention. So there was a call for proposals in September, last September. Had a month to put some proposals together. Just the importance here around the criteria. Only FRIAA members were eligible for this particular call. And you can see the criteria there. Pretty difficult to achieve when you think of the level of infestation in Alberta. So first off, they These were stands that needed to be in the inactive holding zone. They had to be 50% kill in the canopy trees killed, at least obviously mostly pine. There couldn't be any understory. The trees had to be a certain height and a certain age, and the last criterion was that the area could not be in the net timber harvesting land base, and therefore could not be in a position to support a commercial timber harvest. So a lot of hoops to jump through, or a lot of criteria to meet. It made it very difficult for any of us to find stands that would be suitable. So the proposal objectives, and this was from FRIAA, needed to demonstrate in the order shown here, the priority order, those things. So it's the things you would expect: wildfire risk, watershed intactness, support species of special concern, mitigate some of the values that might be in jeopardy, such as recreation, soil stabilization, or riparian zone function. What is missing on that list is a criteria around timber. So timber value could not be a reason for doing a project to support timber production. And the reason for that is because of some legal sensitivity around the U.S.-Canada Softwood Lumber Agreement. We cannot be, under that agreement, there cannot be any subsidy. And so we're not doing this for the purposes of timber production. However, we are doing it under the last objective to develop a project to determine what's going to happen. So a research component of this project. So you've seen the map on the right several times today. Map on the left is that the Holocaustic situation in BC that we heard Dr. Nelson refer to. Then that was in 2007. So the map on the left shows the status of Mountain Pine Beetle the year following the first infestation, or the first in-flight in Alberta, into Alberta. The map on the right is 2013, the one that Erica showed you first and has been shown by several others. That indicates the basically sites that have been where there's been infested trees found. Okay, so where there's been a survey location, those are the survey locations. Now, this area in the north is devoid of any red dots. So that gives a false impression. It gives you an impression that, in fact, there's no infestation there. Well, in fact, there has been no survey done there because we've lost the battle. I'm going to show you some photos of this area. And I'll give you some stats on what we have up there. So, I mean, we heard this afternoon about R values, and when they get to a certain point, you're pretty much going to lose the battle. Well, that's what happened in that area. There's a couple of charts just to indicate for the Canfor FMA, and by the way, our FMA is in 3 blocks. There's Grand Prairie, there's a main block down south here, there's what we call Pasquasca, and then what we call the Peace block, right along the Peace River. This shows the proportion of pine, or lodgepole pine, on our FMA. It's about 20% of all species is pine, or of the total species mix. This is the conifer mix down here, so we're about 40% pine on our FMA of the conifer species. So there's photos. That's fairly light level infestation, less than 50%. These photos I'm showing you now are areas that we have harvested under our Healthy Pine strategy. This area, over 50% infestation, but again, we were still able to salvage this area. This one, over 80% infestation, again, has been harvested. And so I'll show you, this map indicates, and this is from our Healthy Pine strategy, it indicates the harvest sequence that we're following. So the red areas are areas that have already been harvested. That was the first 5 years of our 15-year Healthy Pine strategy. So in our case, we determined through some modeling that we could handle and basically reduce the 75% of the most susceptible pine within 15 years and still be able to utilize that much extra volume in our mill. In our case, it was about a 15% increase in AAC for 15 years. First 5 years of that 15-year period is the red. We pretty much harvested all that red now, with the exception of this area here, and that's in the caribou range, and I'm not going to talk about caribou, Dan. So we haven't been able to achieve it there, but we're also halfway through our second period here, the blue. So on our FMA, and we heard several presenters talk about the beetles are doing okay in this area. I think we're doing very well at a combination of level 1, the work that the ESRD does with their through their contracts, and also our industry strategy. So we, in fact, in many of these areas have pretty much taken out all of the susceptible pine. So I think it's a success story on the main block of our FMA. Different story here. Well, actually, we've finished our harvesting in that area, but what we have there is some areas that we weren't able to harvest, and I'll get to that in a minute. This is the kind of situation we have in that Peace Block plus areas north of the Peace River. Pretty much total dead. Problem is made more difficult in that these are not pure pine stands. This is a pine mixed wood stand, so there's some spruce, but there's a lot of deciduous. And because of the economic situation in Alberta and across North America regarding the oriented strand board industry, there has not been a sufficient market for deciduous timber to go into a lot of the mixed wood stands. So it's made it very difficult to address the infestations in mixed wood stands. This is what we're looking at. This is photos from the area that we have chosen to rehabilitate. It's an area that we harvested well, over 90% of the susceptible pine in the area, but these stands, they're remnants of blocks. They're some entire cut blocks that we just decided we could not afford to harvest. And these are just some photos to indicate what we've got there. Most of the trees are a lot smaller than the ones in these photos, and certainly smaller than this. But I showed you these photos here just to indicate what happens to these pine. Canfor has a lot of experience with dealing with mountain pine beetle, mostly in BC, of course. We know a lot about shelf life, and we know in BC that the shelf life is proven to be greater than 10 years in many cases. But we're just determining in Alberta that the shelf life is somewhere between 3 and 5 years. The wood deteriorates much more quickly, not certain why. And also we get a lot more spiral check, which makes it unsuitable for lumber production. And also the blue stain tends to migrate, it migrates through the sapwood, and the sapwood in Alberta appears to be much more a bigger concentration of the bulb than in BC. So yeah, and then also a lot of our stands are the economics around hauling them because of the distance plays into shelf life and whether it and the length of shelf life. So just a little bit about this proposal that we now have had approved. Canfor is the applicant. We have two partners, Canadian Wood Fibre Centre, Tim of course is representing them here today, and the University of Alberta, led by Vic Leifers, but also others involved. We carefully chose a service provider, and that's Spectrum Resource Group. Spectrum has a lot of experience with level 1 work, working for ESRD. They also have a lot of experience in silviculture work, both in BC and Alberta. So there's our project objectives. We are going to remove a certain number of green stems, certainly the ones that are infested, in the area, although there's not many left. I think the chickens have left the roost, as we heard. I think it was Chuck said, use that, so I'm re-quoting. So the beetles have probably moved on from most of this area, but we want to space the stems, so Tim will get into that more. And we certainly want to try some different treatments to establish a new crop. Basically, to determine how much or how little intervention needs to be done in order to get a new crop. And we certainly want to understand the dynamics around post-MPB infestation. And so we've got, as Tim will explain, a number of trials to test that. There is one specific component that Mike Flanagan from U of A is doing, and that is around the fire risk. So just a little bit about following the bucks, following the responsibility here. This project, it starts with, there was a grant from the Alberta government to FRIAA, and so there's a grant agreement. Then FRIAA entered into an agreement with Canfor, and then Canfor has several agreements, one with Canadian Wood Fibre Centre, one with U of A, or yet to be signed, and then agreement with Spectrum. And those agreements are all about following the money, but also following the responsibility. And those industry folks in the room know that there needs to be, you need to have authority to do activities on Crown land. And the first thing we had to do once this project was in the works was to remove the infested area. It's 451 hectares. We had to remove it from our net harvesting land base. So it's in effect taken out of our out of the FMA. Although it's still legally in the FMA, it's not contributing to our cut. And so in that case, Canfor can't do any harvesting there, so Spectrum had to get a commercial timber permit issued from ESRD. They had to prepare an annual operating plan. And then there's some other aspects about Spectrum's responsibilities and so on. I should mention, like, one of the things Spectrum had to do was acquire, I mean, they're the permit holder, they had to acquire agreements from all the disposition holders, utility crossings, that sort of thing. And in this 451 hectares, there's 29 different dispositions on those sites. Pipelines, right-of-ways for power lines, and so on. So 29 dispositions and 11 different disposition holders. So that's, Spectrum got a little taste of what the Canfor staff have to do pretty much every day of our business. One of the things that we've also had to figure out is we're going to produce some logs from this project, so they have to be dealt with. We certainly don't want to waste them, and so and Canfor can't just take them, so they have to be put up for sale. And so we decided that given the risk of we didn't want to produce a bunch of product that may not be sold, so we're going to sell it before we produce it. And if we're not able to sell it, or pardon me, if Spectrum is not able to sell it, then we won't produce it. And that's particularly the case with biofuel. We want to do some innovative treatment there to produce bale the biofuel, and so we don't want to. It's a very costly project if you to get into that if you're not going to be able to sell it. Anyway, all of the proceeds from the sales of these products will be credited to FRIAA.